Okay, let's get going here. We wanted to do something a little more interactive for this piece. We're going to let you ask some questions in a little bit. We're going to talk about where do we go from here? What is the future of distance learning going forward based on the disruption and innovation that we've been experiencing, particularly over the last year? Not necessarily all about MOOCs, but I'm sure that's part of the conversation. But there's so much going on, and it's changing so fast. It's hard to keep up with sometimes. And so we've pulled together some folks that have different perspectives, come from different types of environments, to talk a little bit about their perspective about where we're going. And we want to have just have a context for that. So what we're going to do is, you've got clickers, right? Everybody have clickers? So you're going to be patient with me in case I'm not doing this right. I'll give it a shot. And we're going to ask you some questions. So, for which educational institution do you work? Let's find out who you are. We are definitely represented. Okay, who's here today? What's your role?
Do you want me to stay up here?
Mm-hmm. You should be doing it. Okay. This is also good, since this is the online teaching conference. All right, very good. Take a look at what we've got going here. How many years have you been working in or around distance education? I'm in the more bandwidth. As I get older, I need more bandwidth. All right. I have to say that term MOOClandia came from our just finishing a course, and that's where we've been living for 5 weeks. All right. So you can kind of see how long we've been around. Some of us for a while, some of us not so long. Some people over 15 years. I think that's amazing that you're here, and we're happy for you to be here, and we're going to use you as our resource. According to the Pew Internet Study, which activity do adults do most on the internet? Yeah, I know, there are some options that aren't here. That's not a surprise either. Is that a surprise? Not really, no. Who's online more, men or women? I know there should be a third option. Men by 1%. The difference is 1%. No, the right answer is men. The difference is 1%. Okay. I'm not good at math either, but I'm better than that. According to a Cisco study, which percentage of college students said they could not live without the internet? I got this one wrong because I decided I can't live without the internet, but I should be able to. That's a surprise, huh? Yeah. If forced to choose, 2 out of 3 young people would choose to have an internet connection instead of a car. As a parent, I could have saved a lot of money had I known this. The average 21-year-old has spent this many hours playing video games. Not in a year. Gamification. Okay, let's think about that one a little bit. That's the last question, okay? You guys did really well, but it gives us a little bit of context and kind of an interesting look at maybe things we hadn't known before. I'm going to try to get to another PowerPoint here while I'm doing that. And these are Barry's slides, and we're going to ask him to start first, but I'm going to introduce people first. Okay. Our group is varied, interesting, I hope. We'll see. And the first person is Barry Russell, of course, who's our Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs from the Chancellor's Office. Sitting next to him is Linda Thor, who is the superintendent, no, she is the chancellor, excuse me, of the Foothill-De Anza district and has held many other positions that have been leadership roles in distance learning over the years. Next to her is James Glapa-Grossklag, my buddy, who is a member of the newly formed Distance Ed Coordinators and Managers Group, which we're looking for a name for, and who is the Dean of Library and Learning Resources in Distance Ed at College of the Canyons. And next to him is Jay Field, who many of you probably know, who is the Associate Vice President of, I just introduced him earlier, of Instructional and Information Technologies here at Long Beach City. And next to him is a new face, Diemand-Yauman, who is a Courserian. He is the project coordinator for many courses that are in Coursera right now. He's our project coordinator for MSJC. We welcome him. And you know Stephen. Okay. And what we're going to do is to start by asking them to give a little bit of thought to where is it going. And we'll start with Barry. You want to start up here? You can.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. During the earlier presentation, one thought kept coming to mind that I hope my physician did finish the anatomy course and the anatomy text. I guess I'll know the next time I go and he says, uh-oh, or start searching Google for the answer. What's going on. But I did enjoy the comments about learning. What I want to do is to kind of very quickly give you a little bit of background of where we are in the college. Because as I start in the college, community colleges in California, because as I was thinking about the future of distance ed, I think we have a rich heritage, a rich background of distance learning in California. And so I want to give you just a little bit of background about that. We are responding to the distance ed challenges by students who are everywhere, learning in all sorts of different situations. They can take classes anywhere in the world, just about any time, and we're getting more accustomed to that. But we also have those things about student authentication that we have to deal with, right? So we want to make sure that it is the student. We also have certain workforce issues that we have to respond to in dealing with changing technology and old systems going to new systems that the community college system has to learn to respond to. And then there is that ultimate frustration that we all feel sometimes when all this comes together and it doesn't seem to be quite fitting. So I'm going to speak to some of that as we move along. Part of the debate that's going on now in the legislature and other is why can't we do more? We need to be doing more distance education, and that it's cheaper, and there are lots of things in that debate that are going on. So I wanted to very quickly, I found this small quote, and I want to dissect it just a bit to talk about some of the issues that I'm responding to at the state level when legislators call over and want me to come testify at a hearing or something. And so I'll kind of dissect this a little bit at a time. The 78% or more of 78% of more than 1,000 students surveyed still believe it's easier to learn in the classroom. And we are finding that, and as we do student surveys, LeBaron is here, and LeBaron's doing a session later on about, that gets into more of these details. But we are finding that students overall do still enjoy the regular classroom. They enjoy the face-to-face, they enjoy the people-to-people contact. Even though distance ed is becoming more and more prevalent, they're not going totally to that. They still enjoy the classroom experience. And I think part of that is the part of the classroom experience that they enjoy, the socialization, we need to learn better how to carry that forward into the distance ed classrooms as well to make that experience better. And then they also make this connection that because costs of education are rising, that going distance, going online, makes it cheaper. And I think that's a misconception. There are a lot of costs involved. All those distance ed coordinators out there know the cost of the LMS systems, the cost of support, the cost of doing online courses is expensive as well. So this is a misnomer, but something that we respond to all the time. Also, you start looking at all of these sorts of clips, and I just picked this one, but it could be coming from hundreds or thousands of articles out there. This one specifically came from USA Today College, and then it was also written by someone who still hasn't graduated yet, who is still at the University of Vermont, and I'm sure did her research, found the information, but the conclusions that are coming from there, this little statement gets plopped in front of a legislator in the California Assembly or Senate, and then I get a phone call and say, hey, why don't we do this? And so there's a lot of response going back and forth about trying to provide more of the data. And it is this, the economy has really impacted this move in the last few years. We've had that downturn in the economy, and now as we come out of that trough, notice that in recovery and prosperity, hopefully our roller coaster is going to keep going, and we'll get to the top of that at some point. But expansion is where we are now, and in distance ed. So we're going to expand now that we have this on, and part of that is the $16.9 million that the governor has set aside for distance learning expansion in the community college system. So just some facts that we know. We know that people tend to go back to school when the economy is tough. So over the last few years, we've had more people coming back to school. What we're seeing now is the predictions are that our enrollment rates are going to go down. That's combined with the economy getting better. It's also combined with fewer students are entering and graduating through high school. Just the population pathway from K-12, we're looking at some down years coming as far as students coming from high school directly to the community colleges as well. So our future is really going to be looking at a reduction in the number of students out there who are coming to school. It shows you here the head count of the growth of online instruction compared to classroom instruction. So we've gone from 2005-06 to from about 12.5% all the way up to almost 30%. So there is a huge increase of students moving towards distance education. This is, I know, difficult to see, and LeBaron probably will go over this more in his session, but I wanted to give, we do have the ability now with the GPS data out there to look at the changes in enrollment in distance education by zip code. And so you can kind of see, I mean, some of this, the people who are at a distance are doing distance education. Kind of makes sense, right? So when you look on the kind of the outside of the state, in the far north and the far east of the state, you see the darker blue. That's 40% to 100% online distance education. Although it's very difficult to see, obviously, with this map, you can drill down and look by zip code at this. So this would be some interesting data for you on your campuses to start looking at of the expansion over the years of distance education. Almost half of the community colleges in the state, and it's not split graphically as this picture is, but about half of the state actually provides totally online degrees. And that is becoming more of something available to students, that they can go through the whole program with their GE package as well as their core courses in a discipline totally online, and more than half the colleges have that. 1 in 4 students expect to take at least one online course this year. No surprise, but it is a growing number. As we saw, the number of courses out there are 30%. So we do have a lot more students taking those courses. Something else that is also something we need to keep our eye on is student success. Now, I have 2 things to say about this. One is, obviously, the success in online classes is less than the success in classroom, face-to-face classes. But I also think that even 65% success in classroom is not good enough. Those should be high. Both of those numbers should be higher. But I think one of the things that the Chancellor's office is looking at with the $16.9 million that's coming forward is to increase that left bar by a great deal. We think it's very important that retention, if we can keep students in the classes and successful in the classes, that's fewer times they have to go back and take the class over again, and the more options that we can provide to the students around the state. So we really want to make a change in that left bar over these next couple of years. And then I have one final message here, and it's basically, let's see if I can get to this, is stay the course.
Good, I can't maneuver.
Stay on target.
We're too close.
Stay on target.
Loosen up.
So, stay on target is my message.
Okay, without wasting any time, Linda? And you can sit there if you'd rather. Yeah, we just had Barry up here because he had slides.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be back at the online teaching conference. Some of the veterans in the room may recall that I was the keynote speaker at the conference back in 2008 when it was at Miracosta College. Anybody there in 2008? Not too many, okay. At the time, I was president of Rio Salado College, one of the Maricopa community colleges in Arizona. And Rio Salado has the largest online enrollment of any community college in the country, with over 40,000 students enrolled in online courses each year. And back then, the title of my presentation was All Aboard the Digital Express. So 5 years later, I am back in California as the Chancellor of the Foothill-De Anza district, and I am still very passionate about online learning. I think the future of online learning in California is very bright. Like Barry, I am very excited about the $16.9 million in the governor's budget for expansion of online learning. If we are smart about how we go about spending these funds, we can have a significant impact on online student success. At Rio Salado College, the retention rate for online students across disciplines and across demographics is 86%. This is remarkable given that the course success rate for online students nationally, as it is here in California, is generally under 50%. The difference in outcomes results from the level of support services that are provided to students. So we have the opportunity, as Barry indicated, with the governor's initiative to fund statewide services 24/7, such as help desks, tutoring, reference librarians, writing labs, and even some advising and career counseling. And assuming our statewide buying power will allow us to customize a course management system, we have the opportunity to build in analytics, particularly predictive analytics, that will allow us to identify students that are at risk of dropping out or of failing online courses. And we can unbundle some of the more tedious aspects of the online faculty role by building in alerts and lots of push technology. And by using new tools, faculty will be able to continually track and evaluate students and individualize content to help students overcome their academic hurdles. And speaking of our collective buying power, my dream is to see a universal technology fee that will allow us to provide all students with unlimited access to e-textbooks and e-resources by negotiating licenses for all 2.6 million California community college students to CourseSmart or some other collections. Just imagine having no students going without a textbook because they cannot afford it. We can do this. And of course, I have to say something about MOOCs. First, I regularly caution people that we are only a few inches down a very long road. I think that it is way too early to be drawing conclusions about MOOCs. Personally, I find the discussion fascinating for many reasons. Rather than resisting MOOCs, community colleges should be embracing the fact that MOOCs bring us back to our original mission, and that is to provide free, convenient, flexible, quality education to everyone, anywhere. So I predict that MOOCs will ultimately be very useful to us and our students as bridge courses, serving as refreshers for students, or, although Stephen said this is not a definition of a MOOC, but as supplemental materials both inside and outside of classes. And although we have been offering online learning for nearly 20 years, MOOCs, because of the involvement of elite universities like Stanford, MIT, and Princeton, have brought attention to online learning at the state and the national level. And it's brought funding from venture capitalists and from foundations. And maybe it's because I live and work in the Silicon Valley, but I am fascinated that so much of the innovation that I see in higher education today is coming from outside our walls. I think we need to be welcoming these entrepreneurs into our colleges so that working together we can develop the solutions to the challenges faced by our students and our institution. So clearly, technology is transforming higher education in very dramatic ways, and if embraced, we can significantly improve student success today as well as in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Zooming right along, and we may hold you a little bit longer than is in the schedule, but you've got an hour for lunch after this, so I just didn't want you to panic. Okay. Go ahead, James.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thrilled to be here. Thrilled to be in the company that's up here on the stage. Typically, when I speak, I like to brag about all the good things and great things that we do at College of the Canyons, and I'm not going to do that today, exceptionally. Although we do pride ourselves on thinking outside the box, and I anticipate that some of the things I'm going to talk about we will be doing soon at College of the Canyons, but I'm not really going to use that as the basis for what I'm sharing. I want to riff a little bit on something that our keynote speaker said, that we still don't know what we know, and I really like that. So I want to share some seemingly random things that I know, some factoids. It's not real deep knowledge, but some factoids, and see if I can make some predictions or some sense out of what might be happening in the future. So here's just some news items or factoids from around the world. In the world's largest democracy, in the world's second most populous country, India, the largest university is Indira Gandhi University, and it serves over 3.5 million students in one university. The world's third largest democracy and fourth most populous country, Indonesia, the population of higher education is expected in the next 10 years to grow by 175%. The world's most populous country, China, not a democracy, but nevertheless most populous country, has committed to building 5,000 open courses per year over the next 5 years as a way to meet the demand for higher education among its population. 5,000 courses a year over 5 years. And in China, there are thousands of study groups consisting of thousands of members who support each other through formal and informal learning pathways. In Brazil, the world's fifth most populous country, the federal government has committed to promoting the adoption of openly licensed textbooks, digitally based textbooks, and openly licensed textbooks in the primary education system. In Poland, which has been the healthiest economy in Europe for the past 8 years, so we're not extrapolating about all of Europe, but the healthiest economy in Europe, the federal government there as well has committed to adopting openly licensed digital textbooks in all of its primary schools. In California, of course, we're fortunate that Senator Steinberg authored the legislation SB 1052 and 1053 to promote open textbooks and an open course library here in California. And I know Barbara Ilovsky out there is going to be talking about that after lunch, so look for that session. So we got good things going on here in California as well. And UNESCO estimates, and there are a lot of numbers out there. Some of you have heard this quote before probably, and there are a variety of numbers, but I think the general point remains. The numbers I found was that UNESCO estimates that the 150 million higher education students today around the world will increase to 260 million by the year 2025, roughly. So that's a roughly additional 110 million students in higher education. Where are they going to go? Some people who figure the numbers figure you need to build, the world, we need to build 5 major universities per week for the next 12 years to meet that demand, if we're doing things in a traditional way, right? So I think all of this adds up to the need to do things differently here in the United States and do things differently in California, taking cues from things that are already happening around the world. And I would point to the model that the OER University has adopted, the Open Educational Resources University, which exists already. It's a collection of 20 higher education institutions around the world, some very wise Canadian institutions up north, and some U.S. institutions, Thomas Edison State College, Excelsior College, Southern New Hampshire University, and institutions like that. They've banded together to promote the following model. we have communities of educators around the world producing openly licensed content. The content is bundled and articulated in a way that produces courses that students can pursue anywhere, anytime. So you have content that's produced locally. Let's say a community of educators that, here in California, we want to produce a sociology course. Students anywhere pursue the learning through those courses. Academic support is offered on a more or less local basis by communities of volunteer tutors around the world. The example I pointed to in China, you've got thousands and thousands of study groups with thousands and thousands of members supporting each other as students work their way through these informal pathways. So you've got locally produced content, global access to that content, more or less local, at least localized language support working, or cultural support working through that content. And then the assessment takes place locally. So you've got global content, and students go to a local institution, one of the 20 institutions that's associated with the OERU, and they take the local assessment. So it's, again, the global content, but local standards, local assessment, and the local institutions issue a credential. So the credit, the unit hour, the transcript comes from that local institution, but these 20 institutions around the world, again, have articulated their courses, as we do, of course, with CSUs and UCs in private institutions. They've articulated their courses so that students can create a portfolio that adds up to a degree through these institutions. So again, you've got the local production of content, globally accessible content, local support, but then anywhere in the world, students can go to get local assessments, locally awarded credit, and then they add that credit together, and they're awarded the credential from the institution. So I would suggest that a very, very concentrated expansion of that type of thinking outside the box, that type of local and global collaboration, certainly infused with open licensing, is necessary to meet the demands of the population increase that I referred to earlier that's going on all over the world, and that really is a challenge to us to stay relevant, a challenge to us to stay competitive, and really calls into question how much do we still not know about what we're all doing. I would suggest that if we scratch the surface, a lot of us are doing elements of what could comprise that type of system, that type of collaboration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jay.
Well, I'd be very happy to just have Barry put that slide back up with the 2 bars on student success. Because really, the way we're looking at it here today, the challenge is improving student success. And so it's everything. As Chief Information Officer, my perspective is to see the connections of things. And so we talk about how to get the students into the right classes. We talk about our local systems that support student success. We talk about our online classes, talk about how to incorporate services into our online classes that we find locally promote student success. So we're doing a lot of that here at Long Beach on a person-to-person, face-to-face basis, and we're looking for how do we incorporate that into the online mode. We have success centers, we have supplemental and directed activities, we have all kinds of things that we do, and yet we really need to find the way to incorporate those. We need to incorporate better faculty support, training for faculty on online teaching and learning, support for classes, support for students, library help, all the things that really have already been talked about. And so really making all those connections work in a way that moves that bar graph up is really the challenge that we're facing, and what we're really struggling and looking to everybody to how we do that. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. My name is Connor, and as Pat said, I work with Coursera. At Coursera, I oversee our blended learning initiatives. I'd like to thank Pat for inviting me. I oversaw Pat's writing course that she taught, that was taught with Lori Ross, Larry Barkley, and Ted Blake, which had just under 36,000 students from around the world. So Pat is Superwoman, and she's doing this now. So it's a real honor to be here.
I'm really tired.
So just sitting up here, it's just, I have so much I want to talk about. There's so many different issues here about improving the efficacy of our in-class instruction, of improving the scale and the costs of textbooks. I don't know if you heard, but Coursera recently brokered a deal with some of the largest publishers in the world to offer free textbooks to all students in the MOOCs, textbooks that I had trouble affording when I was in college. Now a student in South Africa can get for free. And there's just like, we're in such an incredible time right now. I'm having trouble deciding what I should talk about. I think I'm going to talk briefly about something that we don't discuss as much at Coursera, and that is not just the MOOC, but how we can use the MOOC to improve in-class instruction. So Stephen mentioned the wrapped course, which is one way to do it, which is basically using the content as supplementary material, as like a textbook of sorts. But there are a lot of other opportunities here when we have the MOOCs, and there are different ways of coupling the best parts of the MOOC with the best parts of on-campus in-classroom instruction. And a couple models that we're playing around with right now are having one central MOOC and then having individual classrooms that form around this MOOC, this central resource, which gives students the opportunity to leverage these incredible networks of the scale of MOOCs while also having the personal on-campus instruction, a higher touch as it might be required. So that's very exciting. And we look at this as a new frontier of education where we have the opportunity to improve the efficacy of these learning environments while also improving the efficiency and the scale. I know we're short on time, so I'll stop there. But happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, it's me again. I'll keep this short because I had a chance to talk quite a bit earlier. But there's a few things I want to bring out that I think are important. First of all, the idea of licensing content from publishers. While I recognize the importance of making learning materials free for everybody, and indeed that's been a passion of mine for many years, I would question whether licensing content from publishers is the way to do it, because the publishers want to cut from somewhere, and it's going to cost us money. One of the things I've discovered over the years is that for all the stuff that publishers produce, other people have been producing it for free and making it freely available online. And we're rapidly approaching a point where it's no longer necessary to license content from publishers, and it's kind of silly to do it. In Canada, for example, we had a thing called CanCopy, which was just that, where universities would license content from publishers. The last few years, universities have been dropping out of this because they realize they don't need to do this anymore. There was a comment about bringing entrepreneurs into the system, and my first instinctive level reaction is, why would you do that? Honestly, I'm asking, what is it that entrepreneurs are bringing to the system that the system is missing? You know, there was a comment about, you know, once the elite universities picked up MOOCs, that's when all the venture capitalists got involved, right? And they sort of jump on board. And my question would be, well, where were they in the 4 or 5 years before the elite universities even paid any attention to it? If entrepreneurs were so ahead of the game, why weren't they inventing this instead of jumping on board long after the fact? The fact is, entrepreneurs are in the system to make money, but education is not generally a money-making process. That's why governments all around the world have to spend money on education, because you can't just make money offering education. So my take on this is that the system would be considerably weakened and distracted from its goal the more entrepreneurs are brought into the system. Interesting remark about the central MOOC. And that's actually a topic I've raised in the past. That is a model that will happen. Now, publishers and course publishers and companies that publish learning materials are very interested in this because they want to sell this stuff. There's no reason why communities of people can't create the central MOOC for themselves. We do not actually need publishers to do this for us. The knowledge lives in the communities, not in the publishers. And I would again be suspicious. You know, people forget. Back in 1998, 1999, 2000, there was this concept called learning objects. And learning objects, they were intended to be a piece of technology, like object-oriented software technology, where you could put learning materials into an infrastructure and kind of plug it in like Legos. And the publishers got a hold of that, and learning objects became like books online with metadata. And the concept basically died on the tree, except for publishers who made lots of money from it. But it didn't increase access to education. I'd be very disappointed to see us repeat the same mistake with open online learning because, again, it's open online learning. If you bring in the entrepreneurs, you have to ask, where are they going to make the money? And you know where they're going to make the money. They're going to close it. They're going to take it offline, and they'll sell you online textbooks. One last thing, and then I'll turn it over to whoever it turns over to. The concept of credentials. You need to take this seriously. Once everybody is online, which is almost now, right? And once people are working and learning online and are involved in these communities, and they're all very informal, amorphous communities. People like to slice and dice them like they're institutions, but they're not. They're very amorphous. The community of physicists has no particular place. It's just wherever physicists go, and they'll flow to the point of least resistance because they're physicists. But once that community exists and people who are physicists are working and learning in this community, the value of a credential drops towards zero because everybody can see you being a physicist online, and they can look at you being a physicist and they can recognize for themselves whether you're a good physicist. Why am I here? Really, seriously, ask yourself that. Why am I here? Right? I don't have a degree from MIT or Stanford, and they wouldn't have me anyways. Right? I don't work for a publishing company. I don't have a title. My formal education, for goodness sake, is in philosophy, not education. I'm completely unqualified. Why am I here? Because I live and work on the network, and people can look at what I do. I post my stuff openly. I work openly, and they can recognize, they can see for themselves that I might actually be a useful person to have around. They're now regretting that. But you see my point, right? If everybody can be seen openly like this, what do we need the credential for? What's the credential buying you that you didn't already have when people can see you're working online? When that happens, the economics and the dynamics of learning changes. We still have MOOCs, we still have community, we still have open online learning, but a lot of the financial drivers pushing people toward degrees and credentials and finishing are gone. And that's the kind of environment you want to be looking toward and planning for. Although you can be sure the publishers will try to stop it from happening. That's all.
Okay. We have about 10 minutes, not quite, for questions, which is really not as much as I would have liked. If you have a question, there's a mic over here and a mic over here, and we'll try to go as quickly as we can, and you can ask questions of anyone in the panel. While you're doing that, I have one thing that I get to say something too. And having completed a MOOC, my feeling is that we should not mistake sustainability for greed. They're two different things, and we need to keep that in mind. And the other is that I did this because I really want to live in a world where people are not ignorant to the changes in the planet. And I would like smart people who understand how to solve problems and who have a lot of knowledge in a lot of areas to be able to solve the problems that other people have been creating over time. So I want to see an educated society because I think we'll all be better off. That's where I'm at with it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over and ask Doug first, and we'll just go back and forth. You can ask your question.
Hello, my name is Doug Hirsch. I'm Dean of Educational Programs and Distance Education at Santa Barbara City College. And first of all, I want to thank the panel, and especially want to thank Stephen Downs for his excellent presentation this morning. I want to say that your walk down the auditorium was actually a success. It increased our anticipation of your being on stage. Now, you spoke about the knowledge being the network, and that made me think, you talked a lot about interaction too, and that made me think about what Martin Dugamas of Moodle talks about as the 4 levels of interaction, and talks about separate and connected. That is, separate, the reflection aspect, and connected, where you have social constructivism. And I was also thinking about one of the requirements that we have as distance educators through the California Community College Chancellor's Office and our accreditation agencies, which is regular and effective or regular and substantive contact. And so I'm thinking that maybe we may need to look at the redefinition of what regular and substantive contact is in terms of the contact within the network as opposed to necessarily the contact with the instructor. Because one of the issues that we all face when we look at MOOCs, and we're very excited about them, is the fact that when you have 36,000 students in a class, and my hat's off to you for doing that, that sounds fantastic, is that obviously it reduces the opportunity for each individual student to have regular and substantive contact with the instructor. So maybe we really do need to look at the knowledge being in the network and the interaction and the contact being in the network. Thank you.
Is there, okay, so does anybody want to address that, not question, Doug, the statement?
Well, it's more of a question about where are we going with regular and effective contact at the state level, so that we can potentially accommodate the development of MOOCs.
Gotcha. Okay, Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I'd like to say is that it's really fascinating from Coursera's side to see classes of 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 students coalesce around this shared content, and seeing how this community of learners support one another. And the fact that a student can post a question about pre-calculus or about writing on a forum and receive a question or an answer within minutes from this community, and then can engage in a dialogue around this point. I think that shows some of the potential that you're talking about leveraging these numbers and these scales to support individual learners.
Okay. Anybody from the community colleges down here want to mention something about that?
Well, the regular effective contact piece for the classroom, the face-to-face classroom or the online classroom, that definition is made up at the local level, and you have the ability to identify that. But I think it's also the responsibility of the local campus to prove that fact. When the accreditors come and ask the question, I don't know that they're looking for one specific kind. There could be other kinds out there, not necessarily the number of minutes that the faculty member is engaging with the students. You could demonstrate regular effective contact possibly in other ways, but the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the explanation to those folks about how that is actually occurring, and are you testing that theory to make sure that there's assessment in there and that you're following up with it.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to a question over there.
My name is Ina Jane Nicholas, and I'm from Moore Park College. And when I think of how I work with faculty to help them become more effective teachers and our investment in student learning outcomes, it's a more traditional model of we set our learning outcomes, and these are our learning activities that engage the student, and then we assess to see if they learn those. And then from my interest in neurobiology and your presentation, Stephen, I got very excited about how much more synergy and engagement this sort of go out and gather information and be engaged yourself and help to define the outcomes and what you want to learn, this autonomy and connectivity. You know, that's how I learn as a professional. So I was wondering if anybody could speak to, or if you could speak to, could we integrate the two, or is there some approach that would both align with we have to cover our learning outcomes and our objectives and assess for them, and we want to engage students and foster lifelong learning?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? How do we make the existing system work when we're trying to do this new thing? The existing system wasn't really designed to do this. You know, and it relates to the question of interaction as well. I did a presentation recently where I talked about two kinds of community. The one kind of community is based around a topic or a domain. It would be similar to Wenger's communities of practice. The other kind of community, communauté de part, or peer community, is the community around the person, their family, their friends, the people in their neighborhood. And this is kind of where these things fall into place. On the one hand, there's the subject, and the subject is going to be more and more a distant thing as they take part in these MOOCs. On the other hand, this local support is going to be more and more important. So what's going to have to change over time is a rethinking of the metrics, a rethinking of what the local organization, the local college is responsible for, and what the more remote entity is responsible for. Covering the content properly, so-called, is going to be more and more the property of, you know, the online distance learning, community-based kind of entity. And the local institution is going to be looking at local metrics. You know, the local, and I want to be careful too, because right now we think of things like colleges and that as local learning institutions. But I think we are going to see over time that they gradually transition from learning institutions to community institutions. And you know, especially with the community colleges, they're almost already that now. You know, you have courses and programs in woodworking and welding and all the rest of it that some people take for a career and other people take out of interest. And these facilities that people can't have in their homes, because who can have oxyacetylene torches in their homes? You know, these become more and more important. So the trick, I think, because I know I sound like I'm wandering, but the trick is to shift the metrics. And if you can shift the metrics from acquisition of a domain of knowledge to support for needs and interests at a community level, that's how to address this change in education. I don't know if I answered your question directly, but I hope in a roundabout way I did answer it.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I think Doug's question, Ina Jean's question are right on, and Stephen's response is right on. We're not throwing up our hands and running out of the room screaming. We're trying to figure out how we can marry these two big developments, let's say. Or, you know, the constraint of regular effective contact, accreditation, regulatory requirements and metrics and so on with what's going on out there. And I think a lot of us would remember 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were saying, how the heck can we do tutoring online? How the heck can we do a library online? How the heck can we put a textbook online? How the heck can the student pay online? How can we do counseling online? All that stuff, and we figured that out pretty well. And we're serving a whole bunch of students through that. So we're not throwing up our hands. I think it's terrific that we're asking those questions.
Okay, you guys, I hate to say no, we can't ask any more questions, but we're way, way behind.